Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. And guys, it's that time of year again, the most wonderful time of the year. And I can't believe there's only less than a month until 2024 when it frankly felt like 2023 was only getting started. And you know, a lot of times after going through a whole frenzy of getting things done and after the initial moment of relief, we would tend to forget how far we've come and how much we've accomplished. And I have to say the theme of 2023 felt exactly like that. All frenzy and barely any pauses to reset, rest, and refocus. And this whole year just felt like a PC that never got switched off, constantly on sleep mode and running in the background, heating up. But the good news is there are still 20 days until 2023 comes to an end. So if you also spend the majority of the year running around like a headless chicken, it's not too late to take a pause. Write down a list of things that you want to do, people that you want to see, and just focus on that. And if I may, I would suggest you to keep the list precise and short. Limit it to not more than 5 items because a laundry list of over 10 items is exactly how you will not get any of those things done. I have to be honest, when there were moments during the year when I tried to take some time off to rest instead of doing anything else and working on Proudly Asian, I would start thinking to myself like, I could have used this time to be working on Proudly Asian, doing live admin, cleaning the house and all that, forgetting that I was actually tired and also forgetting the fact that we actually have also accomplished and gone through a lot on Proudly Asian. So for this episode, there's only one thing that I want to do, which is to take a reflective moment to look back on some of the amazing milestones that we celebrated together on Proudly Asian. But one important update is we are now on TikTok for those of you who don't know. So if you're also on TikTok and would like to check us out, please feel free to go on TikTok and look for us at proudly.asian. We're nowhere near being a pro at TikTok, so do excuse us as we're still learning the ropes. But okay, without further ado, 2023 highlights and milestones. Let's go. Now in January, we celebrated our first anniversary. And to think that initially when we started Proudly Asian, we would be so proud of ourselves if we could push out even just 5 episodes. And looking at where we are at right now, episode 80 is just insane. And this year, I have really seen the growth of the show in terms of our audience and also the range of topics that we cover. We started off trying to feature as many different Asian experiences as possible with Proudly Asian. And for those who are new here, a bit of context about how we really got started with Proudly Asian. It was pretty much inspired by my own experience and also the experiences of the people and friends that we have crossed paths with who either grew up as third culture kids, immigrant kids, or the overall Asian diaspora experience in general. And what initially connected us with a lot of listeners is the shared experience of how sometimes or for a lot of Asians all the time. When we meet new people, they would already have some preconditioned assumptions about us before we even start talking about our own stories or before they even got a chance to speak with us. So some classic examples will be getting asked where we are from, if we live and grew up in a place outside Asia, and the classic follow-up question will always be, where are you really from? Or a lot of our Asian American friends and ethnically Asian friends who grew up in the UK and Europe will be familiar with people saying, wow, your English is really good, despite English being their first language. So when we first started Proudly Asian, we want to show the world that one, Asians can look and sound in so many different ways, and East Asians are not the only Asians around, and Asians are not a monolith. And two, one's identity and how he or she behaves are not going to be decided by their skin colors. So looking at someone's skin color or name will give you zero information about who the person is and what his or her story is. And number three, what we want to highlight on Proudly Asian is that the experiences that we highlight on the show are not something that only happens to Asians, because everyone goes through feeling not belonging and misunderstood at some point in life. But obviously, some will experience it a little bit more than the others, given racism still is very much a thing. So in a way, while our platform is called Proudly Asian, it's not just an Asian platform that only matters to Asians only. Asian stories are human stories, and we don't need to be seen in a different lens or put in stereotypes and boxes, because we are all human, not robots or manufactured goods. And to this day, it is still so hard to explain to people how not all Asians have the same growing up experience and eat the same food, or not all Chinese speak Chinese, you name it. So if the concept of multicultural identity is that difficult for people to understand still, it is even harder to change society's perception about people with disabilities, which we highlighted in season 3 of Proudly Asian, and is perfectly captured by our guest in episode 46, Mizuki, who is a Japanese mom from Japan who's been living her life in a wheelchair since she was a child.
But once I disclosed my disability, or I use wheelchair, the employer said, "Oh, Mizuki, so if you have disability, we are not hiring people with disability right now, so we are sorry." Or 80% of them, they just shut down all the doors, close the door, and then I cannot really move to the next level. And then another thing is they still want to have a job interview, but not a regular job, but the one for the job that they created especially for people with disabilities. So which is a lower expectation, less responsibilities, and then lower salary, and usually contract based. A bit very different setup compared with the one for people without disabilities. I can do many other jobs, but they think, oh, you have disability, and then this job is dangerous for wheelchair users, so why don't you try this admin work, for example. So I feel you are not really seeing me, but you are seeing me one of the people with disabilities.
And Singaporean marketer Si-en Lee, who was born with a condition of genetic dwarfism, also pointed out the phenomenon of being disabled by society.
So I think the biggest issue is really that people with disabilities need help, or that they are in need of saving. And I disagree with that misconception. I think actually society needs help. So there's actually two models of disability, medical and social, right? And in the medical model of disability, disabled people are actually seen to play a passive role where they need to be cured. They are presumed to be unable to contribute or really, to participate in normal life. While, the social model of disability sees the inability of a person to function in society not because of their condition, but because of the societal and environmental barriers. and that is that, it is not being universally accessible to everyone. So it's not the individual's fault for not being able to participate, but rather because society is not able to provide and meet the needs of everyone. It only meets the needs of the majority. And so in that sense, we're not really disabled by our bodies, but we're actually disabled by the world around us.
No one is born to think they are different until society conditions them and make them think that they are different. And Mizuki's example speaks to the importance of visibility of the many different people that exist in the world. We need to be able to see people who look completely different to us or have completely different physical conditions doing the same thing as us in their own ways. And at the same time, we also need to be able to see people who might look like us in various living experiences, situations, and speaking different languages. And this is what Proudly Asian sets out to do. There's never just one way to look at Asians and anyone. You can't assume someone's background or growing up experience just by looks. And this is why at Proudly Asian, we would like to show possibilities, not limitations. We would like to challenge outdated stereotypes and misconceptions. Not that they were ever in, but you guys know what I mean. We want to inspire people around us to see individuals before skin colors, see abilities before disabilities, because being normal does not mean looking, sounding, or acting like anyone else. That isn't normal. What is normal is how we all just come in different shapes, colors, sizes, our own ways of thinking and doing things. And that is what normal is supposed to mean. And it was a truly eureka moment when Filipino transgender psychologist and lecturer Dr. Brenda Alegre spoke on episode 49 from her experiences as one of the only transgender academics in Hong Kong, that the world needs us to be ourselves so people can learn what it's like to be us.
I remember being told by a lot of my relatives and even teachers, in elementary and secondary school and university, that I would amount to nothing if I would remain like this. But the thing is, if I could look back and tell them, I got to where I am because I am like this. I teach the course that I teach because I insisted. So I teach about me. I teach about others like me. When I get to go to other countries and speak there, I get to do this podcast. It's because of me.
And there is so much power in just talking and sharing our own experiences and stories. It's one of the most effective ways to fight prejudice and bias, because most of the time, bias and prejudice come from ignorance. And Afro-Asian American actor Ryan Alexander Holmes put it beautifully on episode 51.
Growing up, I didn't feel accepted by my Asian peers. So I felt that the Asian community didn't accept me. So therefore, how I reacted to that was like, I'm not going to be Asian outwardly. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't want to speak the language outside of my household. And what I've realized now that I'm open about talking about this is that like my Blasian self was going through this, but I didn't know that other Asians were going through it too, right? If I went back in time, I would have been out about it and I would have tried to share this with other Asians and been like, do you feel this too? And they would have been like, yes, yes, we do. So it's just crazy how you could go through something at the same time as someone else and think you're not both going through it at the same time.
One of the things that we really want to do at Proudly Asian is to bring more awareness to racism against Asians in Europe and the UK, because their experiences seem to be overlooked and underreported most of the time, mainly because the Asian populations in Europe and the UK are relatively scattered, which makes it a lot harder to gather resources to raise awareness about them. But the truth is, Asians do exist in Europe, not as tourists, but as residents whose families have been there for generations. And yet they still get treated like tourists every day, are subjected to racism, and seen from a different lens despite being equally productive members of society. And as highlighted by our guest on episode 44, Lydia, who is based in Sweden, the kind of racism in Europe tends to be a little bit more subtle, weaved into the day-to-day life, interaction, and language.
I think the racism that Swedes are more used to, what they think of is more this explicit violence. But then the racism that I experience in my everyday life is much more subtle. So that's also quite different from if I compare to my living experience when I was living in US. That was during 1991, 1994, when there was in LA this kind of really big tension between the Korean community and the African American community. So racism was actually fear. It was in my kind of daily life fearing that I might be attacked or I might need to worry about my own safety. Whereas in Sweden, that's not really the case. It's more in the kind of everyday languages or this kind of lack of understanding and indifference that people don't really know about, being Korean. And then they will kind of always ask me like, yeah, are you from China directly? Just by, just looking at me. And things like, I think I also heard a lot from your podcast, but like about, yeah, you speak really good English and things like that. But I think it's also kind of interesting when it comes to people complimenting my English. Sometimes it is really a compliment, like a genuine compliment, because also like Swedes, they are very proud of speaking good English among Europeans. So from that perspective, like, yeah, that's really a compliment. But sometimes also, it can be really a compliment, but it's also sometimes a condescending tone, like with kind of assumption, oh, I did not expect you with your racial background to speak so good English.
That's exactly what racism is like in Europe. It's there, but you can't also quite pinpoint and call it out because they are so subtle in everyday language. Also, another form of racism in Europe is the attitude that they are always thinking that they are more privileged and in a better place than you. So in a way, they will form this attitude that they should speak up or help you out because they pity you, not because they think of themselves as equals. And of course, not every European you come across is going to be like that. And again, they are very, very, very subtle. But the reason why I'm pointing them out is they do exist and they do happen in Scandinavia and Europe and beyond. And during season 3, another very interesting conversation that we had dissecting how racism is often weaved into our day-to-day interaction no matter where we are was our conversation with Hong Kong Indian law professor Pooja about how prejudice and unconscious bias are often introduced without us even knowing.
Consistently across the board in general, especially in the Chinese media, you would often find the term refugee to be very closely located with words that suggested criminality, illegality, or drugs or deviance, right? And so that kind of messaging was very pervasive, and so that entire kind of zooming in onto immigrants as sort of the scapegoat of all of the problems that a community is experiencing. And if the majority of us are only in the news for all the wrong reasons, those are prime sort of factors that are influencing people's biases. And so when you're never confronted with a positive example, And so when you first encounter an ethnic minority, your gut reaction, because of the way that we're sort of hardwired in our brain, is to think of people as a threat and to think about how to get rid of them.
Yeah, this completely speaks to the role played by the media because they can easily change how a certain group of people, community, or race is represented in a society. And it's so important for the media to give visibility and the right kind of representation. And what's interesting is that this very episode has drawn some attention among our listeners in Scandinavia and Europe because they also have their very own so-called immigrant problems or refugee problems. And for many years now, immigrants are often a narrative played around by politicians in Scandinavia as well. Another example is, I think about a month ago, Finland's public broadcasting company Yle reported about the racism and discriminatory attitudes among some doctors in Finland's healthcare system toward minority groups. And almost every doctor interviewed by the broadcaster for the report said that patients with foreign backgrounds tend to have their pain or injuries downplayed by medical staff in Finland and are thought to be exaggerating their condition. There is even a Finnish term for this phenomenon which translates to cultural pain. In fact, a friend of mine who is Asian and currently living in Finland also talked about having experienced something like that at the hospital. And that's exactly the problem in Europe, because with the absence of an identity or organization that unites Asians or ethnic minorities, like what the AAPI community does for the advancement of Asian Americans in America, it's going to be a tough battle. Because Asian diasporas exist in all these countries, but if looking from a country's perspective alone, they just don't have a big enough population in any European country to be doing anything meaningful. So it's still going to be a challenge going forward. But now, another wonderful milestone that's not just for Proudly Asian, but for all Asian communities around the world that we experienced in 2023 was the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning pretty much everything, everywhere, all at once as the Oscars and the award season earlier this year. Michelle Yeoh made history as the first Asian to win the Best Actress in the 95-year history of the Academy Awards. And of course, there's also Ke Huy Quan, who made an amazing comeback to Hollywood and had an amazing awards season as the second Asian performer in history to win Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. He was also the very first Asian actor to win Best Supporting Actor at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. And one magical moment for me this year was actually meeting Ke Huy Quan himself in person and taking a selfie with him. I was essentially working at the same event as he was earlier this year, and I thought I would just go catch a glimpse of him from a distance without bothering whatever he was doing. I don't know, maybe I just looked way too excited and that he noticed me from a distance. So he stopped and started walking towards my direction. And I was like, whoa, oh my God, what's happening? And the next thing I know, he's asking for a selfie. He was like, oh, let's do a selfie together. And at that moment, I was so speechless. I was kind of close to getting teared up because this man is so humble, friendly, and it's the reason why I'm proudly Asian. I mean, he was just standing right in front of me, asking for a selfie. And I think I probably just said something gibberish, saying that, oh, thank you for your speech, which I don't think he knew what I was talking about. But then I was basically referring to his Oscars award-winning speech, which was so touching. And yeah, I mean, growing up, I never really cared for celebrities. So to me, I wasn't really starstruck. I wasn't behaving that way because I was starstruck, but just really pure emotional because this man who had more than his fair share of hardship as an Asian actor in Hollywood, did not let the decades of struggles or lack of opportunities crush his dreams. He never gave up. He bounced back stronger as an Oscar-winning actor and still remains so humble and friendly. And at the same event, he also spoke on a panel, which I was also in the audience for. He gave a massive shout out to film crews as he highlighted how film crews are always the first to arrive on set and the last to leave, because he's been there himself. And to me, that is true professionalism, because true professionalism is when an actor or on-screen talent acknowledges and is aware of the workflows of different behind-the-scenes crews. And we often overlook the hard work of over thousands of people on a film set because the actors are all we see on screen in the final product. But Ki Hui's story is a reminder that it's never too late to pursue your dream. And all the hardship and indirect paths that you go through along the way to get you where you ultimately want to be are just going to strengthen your foundation and character and prepare you for success in a more sustainable manner. Another highlight I would like to point out from 2023 is, of course, the consistent support from our listeners from around the world. Some of the best moments working on this podcast are always when I get to hear from you guys, reading about your experiences in response to our episodes on either social media or email. And one of the craziest moments was when some of you actually went on our Ko-fi page to buy us some coffee. I mean, what? Like, I remember waking up to that email and then the email title was like, someone bought you coffee on Ko-fi, you know, something like that. And then I thought it was a spam email or something. But then when I clicked into it, I was like, no, wait, it's real. I know we mentioned this in an earlier episode, but once again, I would like to take this opportunity and from the bottom of my heart to give a massive thank you to our listener Megan for buying us 10 cups of coffee in one go on Ko-fi, and also Eliza and Adrian for buying us multiple cups of coffee in one go earlier this year as well. We definitely did not begin producing Proudly Asian thinking there would be any monetary gains from doing this, and in fact, some might even say this is probably one of the most foolish things to do financially, because, you know, we're trading time and sleep for nothing. But to me, what I gained from Proudly Asian is definitely far from nothing, because having listeners from around the world from over 35 countries, that's crazy. And speaking to strangers from across the globe about what's similar and different about our growing up experiences, that's also mind-blowing, to be honest. I'm learning so much from you guys, and I'm so grateful to have all of you be listening to our episodes consistently throughout the years. And I just really love it whenever I get to learn from our guests about how being or becoming Proudly Asian is not really a destination, but a journey. And all of these to me are all priceless. You know, the global community that we have at Proudly Asian. And yeah, I mean, this is basically what makes it worth it. I mean, I'm speechless because this has just been so magical. So thank you, you guys, for sticking around, being there for us on Proudly Asian, on social media, Instagram. I just love hearing from you guys. But of course, if you like what we are doing on Proudly Asian and you would like to show some extra love and support for us, there are a couple ways that you can do it directly. And number one, the most straightforward way will be to leave us a 5-star review on major podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And on Apple Podcasts, you can also write us a review and let us and people who might come across our show know what you think and what you like about Proudly Asian. And the second way to support us is, as mentioned earlier, you can also feel free to go on our Ko-fi page to buy us some coffee. But don't feel the pressure to do it. If you appreciate us and if you would like to sponsor a few cups of our coffee, you can always do so. You can always find the link in the episode description. But again, I just want to say thank you for sticking around for another year. Thank you for finding us if you're new here. Speaking of support from our global community, we are also equally grateful for the support from different platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify for including us in their features and front page collections once again this year. You have no idea how much it meant to us because there are just so many great podcasts out there around on the internet, and sometimes it will take a while for our listeners and people to discover us. And these features, basically pushed out by Apple Podcasts and Spotify, have really helped a lot in the sense of getting the word out and also helping people find us. So thank you so much, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And another amazing feature that we got this year was that we were also featured by NPR's affiliate radio station in California, Cap Radio, on their newly launched podcast Mid-Pacific, which is a show that focuses on highlighting different aspects of the Asian American experience. And we also spoke with the show host and producer on our podcast as well, who tells us about her experience growing up Asian in a predominantly white neighborhood in New York.
You kind of want to avoid being too Asian. So you try to meld into whiteness. You try to bring the normal looking lunch to school, and you don't want to wear any clothes that, I even for a very long time would avoid wearing the color red, because people, I think, would stereotype Asian people wearing red in a certain way, avoid wearing a high neck situation, to avoid it being looking like a cheapao or something like that. Just honestly, it's very sad, I think, in the ways that we kind of flatten our Asianness and try to make ourselves palatable and comfortable to understand for white people. I think, unfortunately, that's a lot of what happens. And that's what I see happening with other Asian folks who have grown up in predominantly white areas.
Lately, Spotify Wrapped has been all over social media, which is amazing because it has become that yearly tradition that comes around Thanksgiving or Christmas time. And for Spotify users, we get to see analysis around our music behavior, habit, but for podcasters, it's also a chance to get to know more about our listeners from around the world. And our Spotify Wrapped this year told us that we got the most new listeners in Singapore, Sweden, Japan, the US, and Australia. So once again, welcome to Proudly Asian if you just joined us in 2023. And what we also learned from this year's Spotify Podcaster Wrapped is that our most shared episode this year is our Bali episode, which is basically a mini podcast documentary that was inspired by my trip earlier this year to Bali. I've only been to Bali twice, but it has always been my favorite place to go in Asia. It has always been very special to me in terms of my personal growth. So every time I'm there, the local Balinese people are always so friendly and remind me that there are just so many different ways that we could approach life, and it doesn't always have to be one way. And this is why I decided to produce that Bali focused episode, because other than seeing it from a tourism point of view, I would like to learn more about this island from locals' point of view and cultural point of view. And because I want to do it right, I ended up spending so many sleepless weekends researching, talking to local Balinese people, reaching out to them, and putting the pieces together in post-production. And it was all worth it in the end, because a lot of you actually messaged me telling me how much you love the episode, and some of you even discovered us through the episode and have been sticking around. So again, if you're new here and would like to listen to our Bali episode for a slightly meditative listening experience for this year-end period, you can listen to our episode 56, Love Bali the Way It Wants to Be Loved. And now let's hear some of the snippets from the Bali episode as our local Balinese guests share their views on their culture. Why are Balinese people, most of them, why are they so chilled?
I think it's the island mentality. And secondly, I think it's also because we believe in higher power, that we believe that your future or your life is already planned or mapped out by gods out there. So you don't have to worry, because if you don't get what you want, you may get it later, just in a different way.
Life is easy here. The food is cheap also, and life is not like, you have to do this. Here it's more like, okay, yeah, that shit doesn't happen, no problem. We have a family. Still gonna be like, you come home and you're not gonna be starving or something like that.
This year, I'm so grateful to have an amazing lineup of guests for both season 3 and 4. We had Coffee Meets Bagel co-founder Dawoon Kang for our Valentine's Day special, Chomp founder, who is also this year's Forbes 30 Under 30, Carla Martinez, who shared her journey becoming proudly Asian as half Swiss, half Chinese. We also had Filipino actress Crisel Consunji, who was the lead actress of the amazing Hong Kong movie Still Human. Michelle Lee, the kick-ass TV anchor and boss lady behind the Very Asian Foundation, Paji and Yasmin from Outcasts from the 853, and of course some of our amazing podcaster friends, including Linji from West Asian Podcast. Oh, Ben was also in season 3 as well. We also had Curtis from the Infatuation Podcast, and also Jules from Asian Soup Podcast. And we also continued with some of our signature series, of course, like Proudly Asian Food Month, where we got to highlight Filipino food with cozy mystery book author Mia P. Manansala, who is the author of the super fun Tita Rosie Kitchen Mystery Book series. She spoke with us about the challenge as a BIPOC author and how she connects with her Filipino heritage growing up in America.
And most people don't really know how many yeses you need for a book to get published. So like I had my agent, I had editors who wanted to take me on, but the editors have to convince the sales team at the publishing companies, right? Because writing is an art, but publishing is a business. And so 3 times I got really close, and 3 times the sales team said no. They said, she's not a good investment. She has no audience. People are not going to read her books. One went so far as to say, she has a great voice, but traditional mystery is for older white women. Nobody's going to buy this book. People told me I should be writing YA instead, because YA is where diversity is. So like things like that. And this was like 2018, 2019. It was not that long ago. You'll be amazed at how many times people of color have been like, oh, they're not X enough. I've had a friend who it took her over 20 years to get published because her characters weren't Black enough. Her as a Black woman writing Black female characters. My character's like, I'm like, I don't wake up Filipino-ly and brush my Filipino hair and wash my Filipino like we just kind of exist in the world. You know what I mean?
Speaking of Proudly Asian Food Month, this year we also got to highlight craft beer brewed with surplus bread in Hong Kong with food upcycling startup Bria co-founders Anushka and Naman, who are also this year's Forbes 30 Under 30, by the way. And then we also got to get an introduction of Balinese cuisine with Four Seasons Resort Bali head chef, and Cambodian cuisine with Cambodian-American entrepreneur Johnny, who is behind the Long Beach Sugarcane Juice Bar, Sweetgrass Sugarcane Juice. We even did a collaboration with Filipino-American pop artist Super Smack to highlight orange chicken and the song that he wrote about orange chicken. So if you have not checked out any of those fun Proudly Asian food videos, do go to our Instagram, YouTube, TikTok if you want to just check them out and get some inspirations about what your next dinner could be. And as we moved into season 4 in the last quarter of the year, we also made a significant shift to our focus in terms of our episodes and topics that we cover on Proudly Asian. We wanted to focus more on cozy and personal topics like personal and career development with mental health as the key focus. So we talked about burnout again because it's still not talked about enough. And the pressure of firstborn sons and daughters who grew up in an Asian family, and also the stressful education and work cultures in East Asia like Hong Kong and South Korea, which was such an eye-opening episode. And we also launched the brand new Proudly Asian Money Smart series to tap the collective wisdom of our guests from around the world about how they get cracking with sorting out their personal finances. And the series was not really so much about the how, as in what you have to do to become rich, etc. It's not really about becoming rich, but more about hearing about real life examples of how people manage their personal finances. And if we learned anything from the series at all, we definitely learned that even for some of our guests who appear to be very competent, who seem to have their finances all figured out and under control, they also did not start off knowing exactly what they needed to do. And through the Proudly Asian Money Smart series, we also wanted to highlight some specific money situations that are actually more common than you and I thought. For example, getting made redundant. I have to thank our Korean, Australian podcaster friend Jules for sharing her experience getting made redundant earlier this year so generously on one of our recent episodes. The ultimate message that we really want to get across through our Proudly Asian Money Smart series is really, we have to talk about money. And we have to talk about some seemingly challenging money situations, like getting let go, the reality of freelancing, quitting your job. We have to get real about all of these topics before we can actually make any progress. And the only way to make them seem less scary and difficult, of course, is by talking about them and keeping an open mind so we can learn from each other. So there are so many ways that we can manage our money, live our life. So all we have to do is really to be honest with yourself and your money situation, and you get to define your own version of success and what being rich means to you. And as the new year rings in, I normally do not come up with any resolutions because I just don't really believe in setting even more limitations for myself about what I have to do or should do. I'm more of a believer in when you allow things to happen and let go of control, you will realize there are often more amazing things lined up for you, which you will have never imagined otherwise. So, but I do have one realistic goal for myself as we go into 2024, which is continuing to make developing good habits a real non-negotiable task in the new year. So some of the things that I've been starting to do is that I started coming up with a realistic to-do list rather than maintaining a laundry list of to-do items that will end up overwhelming myself and I end up not getting any of that done. So each day, what I started doing was I only limit myself to 3 to-do items. This is not about my job, not about work, but just like 3 items that I have to do in life, or with Proudly Asian. I mean, sometimes I get them all done, Sometimes I don't, but every day I do assess how I feel mentally and also physically and adjust the to-do list accordingly, because it just doesn't make sense if you're already all tired, sleepy, and then you still force yourself to have 3 things to be done on the list. That's just not being realistic. So that's kind of like a practice that I've started with myself a few months ago. And so I will report back if that works. But so far, it's been working pretty well for me, because just seeing my to-do list and, for the first time ever, I don't know why I did not start doing this a little earlier. But, these days, whenever I see my to-do list, I was like, oh, okay, there are only 3 tasks. I can do it. Instead of like back in the day, I would see my to-do list and oh my God, there are like 20 items that I have to do. I have to ring the bank, record, write a script, blah, 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 all that. And, just by reading the to-do list, I would just get so overwhelmed and I'll just be like, yeah, I give up. Yeah, this is a problem for another day. And then you end up becoming so behind on what you have to do. And that's just really not ideal. So keeping it smart and realistic with your to-do list is something that I find very helpful as I went through this whole like year-end crunch time. And the other thing that I'm so proud of myself about is that I also started making self-care and rest actual items on my to-do list, which is something that I never ever allowed myself to do or even thought of doing for some reason. Like if anything, this year has taught me that health is so important, and maintaining your health is just as important as going to work, sorting out your finances. And if it helps, it even deserves a chunk of your time on your daily calendar. Can you imagine we are all somehow guilty about stuffing our calendars with, things that we think are important, but actually forget about reserving time for our own health. Because when you don't have a healthy body, you can't go to work, you can't get anything on your to-do list done, and you end up spending way more money to take care of your body, getting well, you might even think you will end up wasting a lot more time, resting, recovering. And of course, you won't be able to spend time with your loved ones if you don't have a healthy body. So I don't know why it took me so long to realize this. But when you think about it, it's almost messed up that we actually put our health after our to-do list, after any aspects in our life. And I know that a lot of you are just like me, guilty of this. And so what really made me realize this was that because this year I really felt my physical health has declined a little bit, for various reasons. And on a particular day when I was struggling physically, I would just allow myself to decide that the one and only task on my to-do list that day was to go to bed before midnight or just rest, have healthy food, or eat on time. And that, my friends, is how you can get started with self-care and rest, if you allow them to start making their way to your actual to-do list. Because again, since we were talking about money or wealth a little earlier, honestly, the greatest wealth is health. Now, before we go, we just want to highlight some of the great insights or advice or, wisdom shared by our guests this year in 2023 on how we can actually collectively move forward to make this world a little bit more equitable, a little better.
I think what's important about being Korean American is you have to really, really just practice patience. You're going to meet a lot of people from all walks of life. And people just genuinely want to know. You can't assume that people are just always trying to make fun of you, try to earn the skin, And we can't keep thinking like, oh, we're a target. No, don't do that. Maybe people are genuinely curious now and they want to be part of us. We have to change that narrative.
If you're telling them to change, you're kind of not listening to their perspective because their perspective is valid. How did they get to that perspective, right? That's the conversation that you want to have. Sometimes it's unbearable. So honestly, coming back to finding your community, you're able to have those conversations a little easier, right? Because you're more proud of who you are. You're not coming from an insecurity and just threatening them and yelling at them like, how dare you have done this to me? They're like, what did I do to you? What are you talking about? Because they're not aware of that, you know? There has to be compassion for that too. Like there has to be compassion and empathy for the way that they are. How did they get there? They weren't born out the womb like, I'm not gonna accept anybody that doesn't look Asian to me for the rest of my life, right out the womb.
You cannot expect someone to know what to say. And if they're not saying it right, correct them. You cannot be angry with it because they don't know. You have to correct someone when they don't know something.
Because so many people were trying to tell me, oh, you're not Filipino. You're not really Filipino. I was like, you don't get to tell me who I am. I know who I am. If you are mixed, if you are in an area that's majority not Asian, if you grew up, not really having those cultural touches. Like I at least had my family keeping me, pointing me, like letting me know who I am and where we came from. Not everybody has that, but I want you to know, like, you don't have to have grown up that way to, be really Asian. You can start as an adult. Like, there's so much I don't know about Filipino history that I'm learning as an adult because it wasn't taught in schools.
We need to see ourselves as main characters who happen to be Asian. So many people now in the world, it doesn't matter what generation they are multiracial, multicultural. We're not just one thing anymore. Not that we were ever one thing, but you know what I mean? It's this idea that we can't live in silos.
The infrastructure, the color, the landscape is different, but we feel the same feelings and we go through the same phases as human beings. So why can't we focus on that first?
Proudly Asian, it's something that I didn't really understand until, like I said, before I was 18. Before I went to uni, I honestly didn't understand. I was like, why should I be proud? Like, I'm not, which sounds so horrible, sorry for saying. But, I had this like major battle with myself and being Asian and, being proud of it. It was not synonymous. Like I didn't associate the two together. Because I missed 18 years of my life, like rejecting this thing. Like, I don't want to do this again. As soon as that pivotal moment happened, I was so incredibly proud. Like I wanted to talk about Hong Kong all the time. I wanted to talk about my mom all the time. I wanted to talk about all the food growing up. And so I think being proudly Asian means, it means being proud, but it also means like acknowledging like the faults that you've made and acknowledging that there was a battle, there was a journey here where you had to like sort of come from. And I think it's like really connecting with who you are and especially who your family is. That's a major part. Like, and I kept thinking, oh yeah, family is just like the people you live with. Like, they're just there. Like, they gave birth to me. Like, they're just there. To me, like, that was what family was like. But actually, family is full of culture and full of depth and tradition. Like, mom would do these, she would celebrate Chinese New Year with us. But I just thought it was like a routine. Like, I didn't understand like the actual heritage it had. I didn't understand the importance it had to my grandmother. Like now we do like tomb sweeping and, and like we give thanks to our grandmother who has passed now. But, and to me, that's what it means. It's like being able to make amends and being able to like come back to it and being able to restart and reset and like and acknowledging that you've made mistakes, but you're willing to fix it and you're willing to go back. I think that's what it means to be proudly Asian.
And with that, we wrap up the final episode of Proudly Asian this year. And after this, we're going to go on a short break to recharge finally and enjoy our favorite time of the year, which is Christmas. We'll come back with a brand new season of Proudly Asian podcast in early 2024. But meanwhile, do check us out on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all the social media platforms. We will still be very much active on those platforms and, talk to us. We'll still be posting content. And we also have some really exciting stuff coming your way. So do watch this space. And finally, I just want to thank you all for sticking around this year, for all of your support in 2023. And Merry Christmas, and wishing you an amazing, happy New Year. See you in 2024. Mwah.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.